Iran, a mountainous, arid and ethnically diverse country of southwestern Asia. Much of Iran consists of a central desert plateau, which is ringed on all sides by lofty mountain ranges that afford access to the interior through high passes. Most of the population lives on the edges of this forbidding waterless waste. The capital is Tehran, a sprawling, jumbled metropolis at the southern foot of the 𝗕𝗵𝗴𝗴𝗲 Mountains. Famed for its handsome architecture and verdant gardens, the city fell somewhat into disrepair in the decades following the Iranian Revolution of 1978 to 1979. Though efforts were later mounted to preserve historic buildings and expand the city's network of parks, as with Tehran cities such as Isfahan and Shiraz combine modern buildings with important landmarks from the past and serve as major centers of education, culture, and commerce. The heart of the storied Persian Empire of antiquity. Iran has long played an important role in the region as an imperial power and later, because of its strategic position and abundant natural resources, especially petroleum, as a factor in colonial and superpower rivalries. The country's roots as a distinctive culture and a society date to the Achaemenian period, which began in 550 BCE. From that time, the region that is now Iran, traditionally known as Persia, has been influenced by waves of indigenous and foreign conquerors and immigrants, including the Hellenistic Seleucids and native Parthians and Sassanids. Persia's conquest by the Muslim Arabs in the 7th century CE was to leave the most lasting influence. However, as Iranian culture was all but completely subsumed under that of its conquerors. An Iranian cultural renaissance in the late 8th century led to a reawakening of Persian literary culture, though the Persian language was now highly Arabiized, and in Arabic script and native Persian Islamic dynasties began to appear with the rise of the Ahirids in the early 9th century. The region fell under the sway of successive waves of Persian, Turkish and Mongol conquerors until the rise of the Safavids, who introduced 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗎𝗔ism as the official creed in the early 16th century. Over the following centuries, with the state-fostered rise of a Persian-based Shi'i clergy, a synthesis was formed between Persian culture and Shi'i Islam that marked each indelibly with the tincture of the other. With the fall of the Safavids in 1736, rule passed into the hands of several short-lived dynasties, leading to the rise of the Qajar line in 1796. Qajar rule was marked by the growing influence of the European powers in Iran's internal affairs, with its attendant economic and political difficulties, and by the growing power of the Shi'i clergy in social and political issues. The country's difficulties led to the ascent in 1925 of the Pahlavi line, whose ill-planned efforts to modernize Iran led to widespread dissatisfaction and the dynasty's subsequent overthrow in the Revolution of 1979. This revolution brought a regime to power that uniquely combined elements of a parliamentary democracy with an Islamic theocracy run by the country's clergy, the world's sole Shi'i state. Iran found itself almost immediately embroiled in a long-term war with neighboring Iraq that left it economically and socially drained, and the Islamic Republic's alleged support for international terrorism left the country ostracized from the global community. Reformist elements rose within the government during the last decade of the 20th century, opposed both to the ongoing rule of the clergy and Iran's continued political and economic isolation from the international community. Under the monarchy, Iran had one of the largest armed forces in the world, but it quickly dissolved with the collapse of the monarchy. Reconstituted following the revolution, the Iranian military engaged in a protracted war with Iraq 1980 to 1988, and has since maintained a formidable active and reserve component. Since the mid-80s, Iran has sought to establish programs to develop weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. And by the late 1990s it had achieved some success in the domestic production of medium and intermediate range missiles, effective from 300 to 600, and from 600 to 3,300 miles away respectively. Outside observers, particularly those within the United States, have contended that Iran's fledgling nuclear energy industry is the seedbed for a nuclear weapons program. Iran's military obtains much of its manpower from conscription, and males are required to serve 21 months of military service. The army is the largest branch of Iran's military, followed by the Revolutionary Guards. This body, organized in the Republic's early days, is the country's most effective military force, and consists of the most politically dependable and religiously devout personnel. Any security forces that are involved in an external war or armed internal conflict are either accompanied or led by elements of the Revolutionary Guards. Iran has only a small air force and navy. A national police force is responsible for law enforcement in the cities, and a gendarmerie oversees rural areas. Both are under the direction of the Ministry of Interior. Basic informations about Iran. Total population: 83,024,745. Available manpower: 47,324,105. Fit for service: 39,842,164. Reaching military age annually: 1,394,476. Total military personnel: 873,000. Active personnel: 523,000. Reserve personnel: 350,000. Air-power. Total strength: 509 fighters, 155 dedicated attack, 23 transports, 62 trainers, 94 special mission, 9 helicopters, 100 land forces, tanks, 2,056 armored vehicles, 4,300 self-propelled artillery, 570 towed artillery, 2,088 rocket projectors, 1,935 naval forces. Total assets: 398 frigates, 7 corvettes, 3 submarines, 34 patrol, 342 mine warfare, 8 natural resources. Oil production: 4,469,000 barrel. Oil consumption: 2 million barrel. Proven oil reserves: 158,400,000,000 barrel. Logistics: labor force: 30,500,000. Merchant marine strength: 720. Ports and terminals: 4. Financials: defense budget: $19,600,000,000. External debt: $7,995,000,000. Reserve of foreign exchange or gold: $120,600,000,000. Purchasing power parity: $1,757,500,000,000. Geography: square land area: 1,648,195 kilometers. Coastline coverage 2,440 kilometers. Shared borders 5,894 kilometers. Usable waterways 850 kilometers. Thank you for watching us.